There is a specific kind of silence that settles in when someone with narcissistic traits finally realizes what she had. It is not the silence of peace. It is the silence of a person staring at a door that will never open again, holding a version of the truth she spent years refusing to see. And if you have ever loved someone like this, if you have ever poured yourself into a woman who could not fully receive you, then somewhere inside, you already understand what this silence sounds like. You have heard it echo through unanswered messages. You have felt it in the strange stillness that followed your decision to walk away. You have sensed it in the moments when she suddenly reappeared, softer than you remembered, more uncertain, more human, as if some invisible mirror had finally cracked. What you are about to hear is not a story. It is an explanation, a careful, clinical, deeply compassionate look at what actually happens inside the mind of a woman with narcissistic patterns when she loses someone whose love was real, not performative, not conditional, not transactional, real. And by the end of this, you will understand something you may have struggled to articulate for years, something that has quietly haunted you, something that finally deserves a name. Before we go any further, if you have ever felt unseen inside a relationship that looked perfect from the outside, if you have ever questioned your own reality after loving someone whose affection seemed to expire the moment you set a boundary, I want you to consider subscribing. Not because this is a channel that needs another number, but because your healing deserves consistency. The work of understanding narcissistic dynamics is not a single video. It is a slow, layered unlearning, and staying connected to material that speaks honestly to your experience is one of the quietest, most protective decisions you can make for yourself. Subscribe, breathe, and let us continue. To understand why a narcissistic woman may not recognize authentic love while it is still available to her, you have to understand what love is being filtered through. In many individuals with strong narcissistic traits, the internal world is organized around a fragile and often unstable sense of self. Beneath the confidence, beneath the charm, beneath the sharp intelligence and social fluency, there is often a self-image that requires constant external maintenance. It is not that she cannot feel, it is that what she feels is frequently routed through a system built to protect her from shame, from inadequacy, from the terrifying possibility that she is not who she needs to believe she is. Authentic love, the kind that sees you clearly and stays anyway, is one of the most destabilizing experiences this system can encounter. Because real love does not worship, real love witnesses. And being witnessed is precisely what the narcissistic architecture is designed to avoid. This is why so many people who have loved a woman with these patterns describe the same strange phenomenon. In the beginning, you were adored, idealized, treated as if you were the answer to something ancient inside her. And then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, the temperature changed. The admiration turned to criticism. The closeness turned to distance. The version of you she once celebrated became the version of you she resented. This shift is not random. In many cases, it reflects a well-documented cycle, often described as idealization followed by devaluation. And it happens because your realness eventually collides with her internal image of what a partner is supposed to provide. You stopped being a mirror. You started being a person. And a person, an actual complicated boundaried person, cannot function as emotional supply. Emotional supply is a concept worth pausing on because it explains so much of what you may have experienced without having language for. For many individuals with narcissistic traits, relationships often serve a regulatory function. Partners are not simply loved. They are used, sometimes consciously and sometimes not, to stabilize mood, to reinforce self-worth, to provide admiration, attention, reassurance, or a sense of control. This does not mean she never cared. It means that caring and consuming were often tangled together in ways she may never have fully examined. And when you began offering something deeper, something quieter, something that asked her to be accountable rather than admired, the supply structure began to break down. Love became inconvenient. Love became threatening. Love became something she had to manage rather than receive. And here is where the first hidden mechanism reveals itself. Many people assume that a narcissistic partner leaves because she stopped caring. In reality, in many cases, she pulls away, sabotages, or devalues precisely because some part of her began to care in a way she could not tolerate. Genuine intimacy activates the very vulnerabilities the narcissistic defense was built to suppress. So she pushes, she tests, she criticizes, she creates chaos. Not always because she wants you gone, but because your steadiness is exposing something inside her she is not ready to feel. And this is one of the cruelest paradoxes of loving someone like this. The more real your love became, the more her defenses often escalated. Now, let us talk about what happens when someone finally leaves, because this is the moment the entire psychological structure begins to shift, though rarely in the way survivors imagine. When you walk away, when you stop responding, when you finally establish a boundary that does not bend under pressure, something profound occurs inside the narcissistic system. It is not immediate, it is not always visible, and it is not always what people call remorse. In many cases, the first reaction is not guilt, but disruption, a sense of wrongness, a sense of losing a mirror that reflected a certain version of herself back to her. Because for many women with these patterns, a partner is not only loved, they are integrated into identity. Losing you does not simply mean losing a relationship. It can mean losing a piece of the self-image she constructed around being wanted, being chosen, being admired by someone who saw the best in her. This is where cognitive dissonance enters the picture, and it is one of the most misunderstood aspects of narcissistic recovery. Not the survivor's recovery, but the internal reckoning that may or may not happen inside the person who caused the harm. Cognitive dissonance is what occurs when two incompatible truths collide. She may have believed you were replaceable. She may have believed you would always return. She may have believed her behavior was justified, that you were the difficult one, that her version of events was the accurate one. And then reality delivers information that contradicts all of it. You are not returning. You are not begging. You are not breaking. You are healing. And that healing becomes a piece of evidence her internal narrative cannot easily absorb. Depending on the individual, this dissonance can produce a wide range of reactions. Some women with narcissistic traits respond with rage, with smear campaigns, with attempts to rewrite the story publicly so their self-image remains intact. Others respond with sudden softness, unexpected messages, nostalgic reminiscing, an almost dreamlike reappearance that can feel eerily gentle compared to who she was before. Some go silent for months or years and then resurface at the exact moment your life appears to be flourishing. And some, though not all, eventually experience something closer to genuine reflection, a slow, uncomfortable recognition of what they had, what they did, and what they lost. It is important to say clearly that not every person with narcissistic traits reaches this reflective stage. Insight requires the willingness to sit with shame without weaponizing it, and that capacity varies enormously depending on the individual, the severity of traits, the presence of therapy, and countless personal factors. But when a narcissistic woman does begin to realize she lost someone who truly loved her, the experience is rarely the clean, cinematic epiphany that survivors sometimes hope for. It is often fragmented. It arrives in pieces, a song, a scent, a moment when someone new fails to meet her the way you once did, a moment when the admiration she chased feels hollow, a moment when the new supply is not as patient, not as forgiving, not as devoted. And in those moments, the comparison begins, not always as accountability, but as loss. She may begin to grieve, though her grief often looks different from yours. Yours was for a person. Hers, in many cases, is for a role, for a resource, for a presence that made her feel a certain way about herself. And this is the second hidden mechanism worth understanding. Regret and remorse are not the same thing. Regret can be entirely self-focused. It can center on what she lost, how it inconveniences her, how it disrupts her image, how it makes her feel abandoned, even though she was the one who dismantled the connection. Remorse, in contrast, requires empathy. It requires the capacity to feel what she did to you rather than what your absence does to her. Many survivors mistake the first for the second, especially when a narcissistic ex reappears with tears, apologies, or grand declarations. This is why discernment matters so deeply in recovery. Because what looks like transformation is often only temporary destabilization, and the same cycle can resume the moment her equilibrium returns. This is a good moment to pause and speak to you directly. If any of this is landing in a place inside you that feels tender, if you are recognizing patterns you have carried silently, if you are finally hearing language for something you could never quite explain, I want to invite you again to subscribe. Not as a formality, not as an interruption, but because the road you are walking, the road of understanding what happened to you and refusing to let it define you, is long, and it helps to walk it with steady company. Everything shared here is meant to support that journey, so take a breath, stay with me. There is more you deserve to understand. One of the most important concepts to understand about why authentic love cannot survive chronic manipulation is that love, real love, requires safety. It requires the ability to be honest without being punished. It requires the ability to disagree without being discarded. It requires the ability to have needs without being labeled needy. In many narcissistic dynamics, these conditions are systematically eroded, often through patterns like intermittent reinforcement, where affection is unpredictably given and withdrawn, creating a powerful neurochemical attachment that can feel indistinguishable from love, but often functions more like a trauma bond. This is why so many survivors describe the relationship as addictive. It was not simply emotional, it was neurological. Your nervous system was trained to associate her presence with relief and her absence with distress, even when her presence was the source of the distress itself. And this is why healthy boundaries so often become the turning point that permanently changes the dynamic. Because a boundary is not a punishment, a boundary is a truth. And truth is precisely what the manipulative architecture cannot metabolize. When you stopped explaining yourself, when you stopped defending your reality, when you stopped negotiating your worth, when you stopped auditioning for love that should have been freely given, something structural shifted. The dynamic that depended on your compliance could no longer sustain itself. And whether or not she ever admits it, that shift is often the moment she began to lose you in a way she could not reverse. Now, here is a truth that many survivors need to hear, and hear clearly. Her eventual realization, if it comes, is not the prize. It was never the prize. For years, you may have imagined a moment when she would finally understand, finally apologize, finally see you the way you deserve to be seen. And I want to gently suggest that this fantasy, however understandable, is often one of the last threads of the trauma bond, because it keeps you psychologically oriented toward her. It keeps your healing conditional on her transformation. It keeps a small door open in your mind that she may one day walk through with the right words. And as long as that door remains open, your recovery is partially outsourced to a person who may never do the work required to walk through it. This is why the most psychologically significant thing in this entire dynamic is not her realization. It is yours. It is the moment you understand that you are not too much. You are not the problem. You are not unlovable. You were loving someone whose internal system could not receive what you were offering, and no amount of adjustment on your part would have changed that. You were not failing to be loved. You were succeeding at loving someone who could not fully love you back. And there is an enormous difference between those two truths, a difference that can quietly reorganize your entire sense of self once you truly absorb it. Your healing, your emotional detachment, your self-respect, your refusal to re-enter the cycle, these become far more meaningful than anything she might one day say, because they are not dependent on her. They belong to you. They are yours to build, yours to maintain, yours to expand. And in the quiet architecture of a life rebuilt after narcissistic harm, there is a kind of dignity that no reappearance, no apology, no belated realization can rival. You do not need her to see what she lost. You need to see what you found, yourself, your discernment, your capacity to protect your own heart, your willingness to choose peace over intensity, safety over chaos, authenticity over performance. And this is where another overlooked pattern deserves attention. Many survivors carry a subtle guilt about not wanting revenge, or conversely, a subtle shame about occasionally wanting it. I want to be clear about both. Healing is not about making her suffer. Healing is not about proving anything. Healing is not about waiting for karma to deliver a verdict you can witness. Healing is about becoming so rooted in your own truth that her story about you no longer has power over your story about yourself. If she someday grieves what she lost, that is her journey. If she never does, that is also her journey. Neither outcome determines your worth. Neither outcome is required for your recovery. Neither outcome is the point. The point is that you were someone who loved genuinely in a dynamic that could not honor genuine love. The point is that you learned, often through profound pain, what real intimacy requires and what it cannot survive. The point is that you now carry a form of emotional literacy that most people never develop, an ability to recognize manipulation, to name devaluation, to feel the difference between admiration and connection, between charm and character, between someone who wants to possess you and someone who wants to know you. This literacy is not a wound, it is a compass, and it will guide every relationship you build from this point forward, including, most importantly, the relationship you build with yourself. So when you imagine that moment, the moment she finally realizes, the moment she sits with the weight of what she lost, I want you to hold it lightly. It may happen, it may not. It may happen in ways you never witness. It may happen in ways she never names. It may happen through the slow accumulation of failed replacements, or through a single quiet night when the mirrors around her stop reflecting what she needs them to reflect. But wherever that moment lives, it lives in her life, not yours. Your life is happening now. Your peace is being built now. Your identity is being reclaimed now. And every day you choose that reclamation over the fantasy of her transformation, you move further into a version of yourself she was never able to fully meet. If this has reached you, if any of it has softened something inside you or given language to something you have carried alone, I want to invite you one more time to subscribe and stay close to this work. Recovery from narcissistic dynamics is not linear. And there will be days when the old ache returns, when a memory ambushes you, when a small trigger unravels a week of progress. On those days, having steady, grounded, psychologically informed voices in your corner matters. Not to rescue you, because you are already doing the rescuing, but to remind you of what you have already begun to understand, and to walk beside you as you continue to understand more. Because the truth is, what you are learning about her is only half of the work. The deeper half is what you are learning about yourself, why you stayed, what you tolerated, what you now refuse, who you are becoming on the other side of a love that asked you to disappear so that someone else could feel real. And that becoming, that quiet, ongoing, deeply personal becoming, is a story that is still being written, one insight at a time, one boundary at a time, one breath at a time, as you begin to consider what the next layer of your healing might reveal.